The fluorescent tube above cell 4 flickered every 47 seconds, and Marcus Webb had counted it 412 times. He sat on the concrete bench with his back against the cinder block wall and his hands resting open on his knees, the posture of a man in deep meditation rather than a man in a county holding cell at 2 in the morning. And if you had walked past the bars and looked in, you might have thought he was sleeping, except for the eyes, which were open and very still, and working through something with the quiet, methodical precision of a machine that does not require rest to function. His suit was ruined. The left knee was caked with dried Georgia mud. The collar had been grabbed and twisted during the booking process, so that it sat wrong against his neck. And somewhere between the roadside and the cell, the third button from the top had been torn free, leaving a small gap in the fabric that let the cold air of the room reach his sternum. He did not adjust it. He was not thinking about the suit. He was thinking about badge number 317 and about Officer Pete Garza, who had stood at the rear bumper without saying a single word while everything happened, and about Sergeant Roy Mullen, who had laughed at the booking desk with a burrito in his hand, and about each specific federal statute that each specific action had violated, and he was building something in the stillness of that cell that would take this entire precinct apart at the seams before the week was out. Down the hallway past the heavy steel door, he could still hear them. Officer Colt Drayden and Garza, somewhere near the dispatch desk, still carrying the energy of men who had won something tonight, their laughter rolling down the corridor in irregular waves, loose and satisfied and completely certain of its own permanence. That certainty, Marcus thought, studying the flickering light above him, was going to be the most expensive thing either of them had ever owned. He had left Washington at 4 in the afternoon, which was already later than he intended, but the service had run long because the pastor had known his father for 40 years and had a great deal to say about a man who had worked 2 jobs for 31 consecutive years without complaint and raised a son alone in a neighborhood that did not make either of those things easy. Marcus had sat in the front pew of the church his father had attended every Sunday for 4 decades and had not cried, not because he did not feel it, but because the grief was so large and so old. His father had been declining for 2 years that it had already moved past the stage where tears were adequate to it, settling instead into something heavier and quieter that lived behind the sternum and did not announce itself. The 1968 Dodge Charger had been the only item in the will, not the house which had a reverse mortgage on it, not the savings account which had been spent down to cover the care facility in the final 8 months, but the car, the deep black Charger his father had bought used in 1979 for $1,100, cash, and kept in a rented garage for 45 years. Because he said a man had a right to take up space on the road he paid taxes on, and he intended to exercise that right in something that made the point clearly. Marcus had driven it out of the church parking lot instead of getting into the government SUV that was waiting at the curb because tonight he did not want an escort or an earpiece or the weight of 35,000 agents and the entire institutional apparatus of federal law enforcement resting on his shoulders. Tonight, he just wanted to be a son driving his father's car home, and that desire, that one entirely human desire for a single ordinary evening, was what had put him on I-77 South at 11:48 p.m. in the rain. 30 years in federal service, counterintelligence, 3 overseas postings he was not permitted to discuss, 2 presidential appointments. He had sat across from foreign intelligence officers and domestic terrorists and corrupt senators and men who had ordered other men killed, and in every one of those rooms he had been the calmest person present, not because he was unafraid, but because he had learned very early that composure is a weapon and panic is a gift to your opponent. He was the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He oversaw 35,000 employees and a budget of $11 billion and an organizational reach that extended into every corner of American law enforcement. And he was sitting in a cell that smelled like mildew and old fear on a concrete bench that had been deliberately designed to be too narrow to lie down on, listening to a corrupt officer laugh in the hallway. and he was the most dangerous person in the building by a margin that Officer Colt Drayden could not begin to comprehend. The rain on I-77 that night was not the gentle southern summer rain that passes through in 20 minutes and leaves the air smelling of pine and wet earth. It was the other kind, the kind that comes in off the Atlantic, already angry, turning the highway into a long, dark mirror and reducing visibility to the reach of the headlights. And Marcus had both hands on the wheel and the Charger steady at 53 miles per hour in a 55 zone, which was not carelessness but discipline. The deep muscle memory of a black man who had learned at 11 years old watching a police cruiser pull his father over on a Tuesday evening in Detroit. For no reason either of them ever understood that perfection was the only available protection, and even that was not always enough. He saw the lights before he heard the siren red and blue strobing in the rain, blurred mirror, aggressive and immediate. No gradual approach, and his first thought was not fear. It was a calm and practiced inventory. Hands visible signal before braking, pull completely off the road, engine off window, down before the officer reaches the door, both hands on the wheel at the 10 and 2 position, do not reach for anything without narrating it first. He had the car on the shoulder and the engine off within 8 seconds of the lights appearing. Officer Colt Drayden took 4 minutes to approach the window, which was a power demonstration that Marcus recognized immediately, and filed away the deliberate withholding of contact, the studied indifference to the rain drumming on another man's roof. The message being delivered before a single word was spoken: "Your time is mine to spend." When Drayden finally appeared at the window, Marcus registered him in a single comprehensive look. 6 feet 230 pounds of gym-built bulk. A jaw that looked like it had been cut from a block of pale granite forearms resting on the door frame, with the particular relaxed ownership of a man who had stood at hundreds of windows exactly like this one, and had never once encountered a consequence. And behind him, hanging back near the rear bumper, Officer Pete Garza, with his hand near his holster, doing what he had almost certainly always done in the 6 years he had ridden with Drayden, which was follow the lead and keep his head down and tell himself that not participating was the same as not complicit. License and registration, Drayden said without a greeting, without a good evening, without the basic professional courtesy that the job description technically required, and a drop of rain from the brim of his hat hit the leather of the Charger's door panel, and Marcus watched it bead and roll without looking away from Drayden's face. "Good evening, officer," Marcus said, his voice low and entirely level. "My wallet is in my breast pocket. I'm going to reach for it now." "I didn't ask for a narration," Drayden said. "I asked for the ID." Marcus moved slowly, produced the wallet, handed it over. Drayden took it and immediately shone the flashlight not on the license but directly into Marcus's face, which was a technique, not an accident. And Marcus held still and let the light hit him and thought, "Badge number 317 noted." "Long way from home, aren't you?" Drayden said, and the word he added at the end of that sentence was not "sir." It was a word that had been used for a specific purpose for a very long time in this country, designed to compress a man's entire personhood into a single syllable of contempt. And Marcus Webb, who had survived 3 assassination attempts and had spent 30 years in rooms where people wanted to break him in far more sophisticated ways than this, did not react to it at all. He calculated instead. "I was attending a funeral, officer," he said. "I'm heading back north." Drayden shone the light around the interior of the Charger, the leather seats, the restored dashboard, the care and cost visible in every detail, and his expression shifted in a way that Marcus had seen before on the faces of men who decided that an expensive thing in the wrong man's hands was itself a form of evidence. "In this car," Drayden said, and it was not quite a question. "It's registered in my name," Marcus said. "If you run the plates, you'll see that." Drayden leaned in closer, bringing his face into the open window, and what came next was the oldest and most transparent escalation in the manual, the claimed smell of alcohol delivered with theatrical uncertainty. "Miller?" "You smell that," called back toward Garza, who shifted his weight at the rear bumper and did not answer clearly, and Marcus thought very precisely. I have not had a drink since 2002, and this man knows that he cannot smell anything." "Step out of the car," Drayden said. Officer Marcus said, steady and deliberate. "I am the director of the—" I said. "Step out of the car," Drayden said, and his hand dropped to the taser on his belt, and the word "now" came out of his mouth like something he had been saving up. Marcus assessed the tactical situation with the speed and accuracy of a man trained to do exactly that. Unarmed, alone Rain Highway shoulder dash cam, running one officer with a hand on a less lethal weapon and one at the rear who would do whatever the senior officer did, and the smartest play, the only play that preserved the option of everything that came next, was compliance. He unbuckled his seatbelt. He opened the door. The moment his leather shoe found the muddy shoulder, Drayden grabbed him by the collar and spun him face first into the wet metal of the Charger's roof, and the cold of it hit Marcus's cheek like a slap, and Drayden was shouting, "Stop resisting," for the benefit of the dash cam, even though Marcus's hands were already up, and his body was entirely still, and the word resisting was doing a great deal of work it had not earned. "I am not resisting," Marcus set his cheek against the wet metal, his voice still level, still carrying the flat clarity of a man making a record. "I am informing you that this is a serious mistake. Open the wallet. Look behind the driver's license. Look at what is there." "I don't care who you think you are," Drayden said, wrenching Marcus's arms back, and the handcuffs went on too tight, deliberately too tight. The particular kind of tightness that is itself a message, and Marcus felt the metal bite into the skin above his wrists and thought with a cold and absolute calm, "Add that to the file." Garza retrieved the wallet from the passenger seat and tossed it onto the cruiser's dashboard without opening it. As Drayden shoved Marcus into the back of the cruiser, the seat smelled of vomit and industrial cleaner. And something else. Something that accumulates in spaces where people are regularly frightened. Marcus settled against the hard plastic and watched through the wire mesh as Drayden walked around to the front of the Charger, already on his radio, calling in the impound. "Civil asset forfeiture," Drayden said to Garza with a grin that Marcus could see clearly through the windshield glass. "Looks like the county just got itself a classic." Garza laughed. Not enthusiastically, the laugh of a man who has not yet fully decided what kind of person he is, but keeps choosing the wrong answer anyway. Marcus looked down at his wrists. The cuffs were cutting into the skin. He adjusted his position slightly, not for comfort. There was no comfortable position available, but to reduce the long-term tissue damage because he was going to need his hands later. He looked at Drayden's badge through the wire mesh and committed the number to memory, with the finality of a man carving something into stone. 317. He thought, "Enjoy this laugh. It is going to be the last uncomplicated thing you do for a very long time." What neither Drayden nor Garza knew, what they had not bothered to check before tossing the wallet aside, was that the encrypted federal phone in the evidence bin had already sent its first distress ping to a secure server in Quantico, and that 90 minutes of continuous signal silence would trigger a Level 3 recovery protocol that would set in motion a sequence of events that no amount of forfeited classic cars or manufactured DUI charges or small-town judicial arrangements could stop or slow or survive. The Harlow County Sheriff's Department had been built in 1961 and had been renovated twice since then, both times on the smallest budget the county could justify. And the result was a building that felt like three different eras of American institutional failure stacked inside one another. The original cinder block walls, a dropped ceiling installed in the 80s that had since developed a visible sag in the northwest corner, and fluorescent lighting, upgraded in 2009, that buzzed with a frequency that seemed specifically calibrated to produce low-grade anxiety in everyone who spent more than 20 minutes beneath it. Drayden walked Marcus through the bullpen at 12:40 in the morning like a man carrying a trophy. He wanted the room to see, and the room obliged. 3 officers at desks looked up, registered the scene, and looked back down with the practiced indifference of people who have learned that observation is expensive in places like this one. Sergeant Roy Mullen was at the booking desk eating a gas station burrito with the unhurried satisfaction of a man for whom midnight was just another hour, and he looked up as Drayden approached, and his face arranged itself into the expression of someone about to be entertained. Mullen was 58 years old and had worked for the Harlow County Sheriff's Department for 26 of them. And in those 26 years, he had developed a comprehensive theory of the world that placed himself near the center of it, and assigned relative importance to everything else, based primarily on how little trouble it caused him, and the man in the expensive ruined suit being walked across. His booking room at midnight fell in his estimation clearly into the category of manageable nuisance. DUI, resisting assault on an officer, Drayden recited with the practiced ease of a man reading items off a familiar menu. And he was driving a vehicle we believe is stolen. "It is not stolen," Marcus said. "It is registered in my name. The registration is in the glove compartment of the vehicle you just impounded, and the registration will confirm that. And I am asking you, as I have asked twice already, to call the Atlanta field office of the FBI and ask for Special Agent in Charge, Sandra Briggs, and tell her that Marcus Webb is in your custody. That is the only thing you need to do, and it will resolve every question you have about this situation within approximately 4 minutes." Mullen looked at him. Then he looked at Drayden. Then he took another bite of his burrito. "Add impersonating a federal officer to the sheet," he said. "That's a felony." Sergeant Marcus began. "And he had a fake badge," Drayden said, dropping the wallet on the desk and flipping it open to the gold shield which caught the fluorescent light and glinted with the very specific weight and finish that distinguished a genuine federal credential from the novelty items sold at uniform supply stores. A distinction that Mullen looked at for approximately 1.5 seconds before deciding it was a very convincing novelty item. "Nice prop," Mullen said, tossing the wallet into the evidence bin. The fingerprint scanner was the next stop, and Drayden pressed Marcus's thumbs onto the glass with considerably more force than the process required, and the ancient desktop computer behind the desk connected to the NCIC database and began its loading sequence, the progress bar crawling across the screen with the particular sluggishness of technology that has been asked to do too much for too long on too little budget. The system returned its result. The screen border turned red. A text box appeared. "Access denied. Classified record level. 6 security clearance required. Contact FBI field office immediately." Mullen stared at it. He hit the enter key twice. The message did not change. "Piece of junk," he said, pushing back from the desk. "System's been glitching all week. Just book him as John Webb put him in cell 4. He looked at Drayden, the cold one. Marcus stood at the booking desk and breathed slowly through his nose and thought about the woman he had heard Drayden speaking to in the parking lot when they arrived. A voice sharp with fear, asking about her car, asking when she could call someone, asking if she could please just speak to someone, and he thought about how many people had stood at this exact desk and been processed by this exact machine and had gone into the hole at the end of it without a level 6 clearance flag going off anywhere, or an agent in Atlanta waiting for a distress ping, and how the machine had simply continued running, because the machine had been built specifically to run without interference. He let himself be walked to cell 4, and the door closed behind him, and the lock clicked with a sound that was definitive and meant to be. And he sat down on the concrete bench and began to count the flicker of the light above him. The smell of cell 4 was specific and layered in a way that suggested history underneath the institutional bleach that had been applied that evening was something older. Something that had soaked into the cinder block over years and could not be cleaned out. The smell of people who had been frightened in this space, the particular cold sweat residue of human beings who had sat exactly where Marcus was sitting and understood perhaps for the first time in their lives how completely alone a person can be inside a system that has decided to ignore them. The sink produced water that ran rust brown for 30 seconds before clearing and then ran clear but cold, the kind of cold that felt aggressive in a room already held at a temperature designed to prevent comfortable sleep, rather than to maintain basic human dignity. And the concrete bench was exactly 2 inches too narrow to lie down on without one hip hanging over the edge, which Marcus recognized as intentional design in the same way that the too tight handcuffs had been intentional, the small accumulated miseries that wear a person down without leaving marks. Tyler Reeves was already in the cell when Marcus arrived, 24 years old, sitting in the far corner with his knees pulled up and his sneakers squeaking slightly when he shifted his weight, and he looked at Marcus the way people in cells look at new arrivals, which is with a mixture of assessment and exhausted solidarity. "What did they get you for?" Tyler asked after a few minutes of silence. Marcus told him what the charges said. Tyler listened and then said, "What did you actually do?" "I drove 53 miles an hour in a 55 zone, and I was black, and I was driving a car that someone else decided I shouldn't have." Tyler was quiet for a moment. "Same," he said, "except I was walking." He had been coming home from a double shift at a tire warehouse on the edge of town. 11 at night, no bus running that late, walking the 2 miles back to his apartment because his car had a broken axle and he was saving up to fix it, and a cruiser had pulled up alongside him, and 2 officers had gotten out, and he had ended up here, and his girlfriend did not know where he was, and he did not have a lawyer, and the charges were disorderly conduct and resisting, which were the charges the department used when they needed a charge and didn't have one. Marcus listened to all of this without interrupting, and when Tyler finished, Marcus sat with it for a long moment before saying anything because the situation deserved that. The weight of it, the ordinary mundane cruelty of it, deserved to be acknowledged in full before anything else. Marcus did not sleep that night. He sat in the meditation posture and worked counting violations, naming faces, building the architecture of what was coming. And around 2 in the morning, he heard Drayden's voice in the hallway speaking to a woman who had been brought in for shoplifting from a drugstore. And the way Drayden spoke to her, the studied contempt of it, the performance of it, the way it had clearly been done many times before and would be done many times after, told Marcus everything he needed to know about the difference between an incident and a pattern. He thought about Tyler sleeping in the corner, curled on his side on a bench he was too tall for, and he thought about how Tyler had no GPS tracker in his shoe, no agent in Atlanta monitoring a distress ping, no 30 years of institutional weight that would eventually come crashing down on the people who had put him here. Tyler was here because this was simply what happened to people like Tyler in counties like this one, and the machine ran because nobody who could stop it had ever been put inside it long enough to feel what it cost. Marcus looked at the flickering light. He thought, "I am going to feel every minute of this. I am going to take all of it with me when I leave, and I am going to use every minute of it." Officer Danny Kowalski arrived at Cell 4 at 7:15 in the morning with a breakfast tray, a bologna sandwich on white bread that had gone slightly stiff at the edges, a small carton of orange juice with a bent straw, and a styrofoam cup of coffee that had been poured from a pot that had been sitting on the burner since before Danny's shift started, and he slid it through the slot in the bars with the studied efficiency of someone performing a routine task, except that his jaw was tight and he was not looking directly at the cell, and everything about his posture was the body language of a 26-year-old man who has been awake all night arguing with himself. Marcus stood up from the bench and walked to the bars, but he did not reach for the tray. He looked at Danny with the full, unhurried attention of a man who has spent 30 years reading people for a living, and what he saw was this young, 2 years on the job, at most, a plain gold wedding band that still sat slightly high on the finger, the way new rings do, dark circles under the eyes that were not from the shift, but from the night, and in the set of the shoulders the particular tension of someone who knows something they have not yet decided what to do about. Officer Marcus said, his voice low and even and not unkind, "You were at the booking desk last night." Danny did not confirm or deny this. He looked at a point slightly to the left of Marcus's face. "You saw the access denied screen," Marcus said. "I see a lot of screens," Danny said. "You saw that one specifically," Marcus said, "because you're still here and you've been awake all night, And whatever you told yourself when you went home this morning wasn't enough to let you sleep." Danny's jaw moved. He adjusted his grip on the tray slot. "I'm going to tell you something, Danny, and I need you to hear all of it before you decide what to do with it," Marcus said. "Officer Drayden is going to federal prison. Not because I'm angry about what happened to me, though what happened to me was a serious federal crime, but because what happened to me is the documented, provable tip of something that has been running in this county for 6 years, and the machine that does it is going to be taken apart piece by piece starting very soon. The question that matters for you right now is not whether that happens. It is whether you are inside the machine when it comes apart or outside it." "You don't know what you're talking about," Danny said, but his voice had lost its steadiness somewhere in the middle of that sentence. "Title 18, Section 242, Marcus said. "Deprivation of rights under color of law. It carries a 10-year federal sentence, and the conspiracy charge attaches to everyone who was present, who witnessed, and who remained silent." "That is you, Danny. You were present. You witnessed. You have been silent since approximately midnight last night." He paused. "How old is your wife?" Danny blinked. 24, he said before he could stop himself. "So you got married very young," Marcus said, "which means you probably did it because you wanted a life with this person, not because it was convenient. You're saving for something, a house probably, because the ring is the only piece of jewelry you're wearing, and men who can afford houses usually get their wives something additional before the wedding." He watched Danny's face. "I'm not guessing. I'm reading you. It's what I do. And what I'm reading right now is a man who has not yet made the worst decision of his life, but is approximately 4 hours away from it." Danny was gripping the tray slot with both hands now. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, and the question came out quieter than he intended. "Go to the bathroom," Marcus said. "Take out your phone. Search the name on the driver's license they booked me under. Look at the first result that comes from a .gov address. Look at the photograph on that page. And then sit with what you see for as long as you need to and ask yourself one question: which side of these bars do you want to be on when this is over?" Danny picked up the tray and walked away without another word. He was back in the corridor 15 minutes later, standing very still near the water fountain, and Marcus could not see him from the cell, but he could hear that the footsteps had stopped, and he understood what that stillness meant. That night at 11:43, according to the timestamp on the federal server log that would be reviewed by investigators. 12 days later, a text message was sent from a personal cell phone to a number that rang in the pocket of an agent who kept her phone on all night because she had been told before this operation began that if she ever received a message containing only the word "Cardinal," she should call the Atlanta field office immediately and report that a Level 3 recovery had been initiated. The text said "Cardinal." It was sent from the bathroom of the Harlow County Sheriff's Department by a 26-year-old officer sitting on the floor with his back against the stall door and his wedding ring catching the light, who had looked at a .gov biography page and understood with complete and irreversible certainty exactly what he had done. Drayden came to cell 4 at 6 in the morning, banging his baton against the bars with the particular theatrical enthusiasm of a man who enjoys the parts of the job that involve waking other people up, and Marcus was already sitting upright on the bench, suit jacket buttoned, hands in his lap, looking at the door as if he had known precisely what time it would open. "Wakey, wakey," Drayden said, grinning at the sight of Marcus's composure, the way certain kinds of men are unsettled by composure in people they have decided to diminish. "Big day. Going to see the judge. My guess is you're not making bail." Marcus said nothing. They chained him to Tyler and 2 other men whose names Marcus did not yet know, but whose stories he could read in their faces. One of them had been crying recently, the dried tracks of it still visible on his cheeks, and one was young, 17 at most, with the wide-eyed stillness of someone trying very hard not to show how frightened he was, and the ankle shackles were sized for someone shorter and dug into the skin above Marcus's dress shoe in a way that would leave a mark. And he noted that too, added it to the file he was building in his memory, and walked toward the transport van without changing his expression. Danny was at the dispatch desk as they crossed the bullpen. Marcus saw him before Danny saw him and took a long moment to read what the night had done. The pallor, the stillness, the eyes that carried the specific weight of someone who has made a decision they cannot unmake and are now living in the space between making it and finding out what it costs. Their eyes met. Marcus gave him one nod, small, precise, the nod of a man who has been given information he required, and then he looked forward and kept walking. In the transport van lurching through the Georgia morning, Tyler leaned slightly toward him in the limited space the chains allowed and said very quietly, "You really are who you said you are, aren't you?" It was not quite a question. "Yes," Marcus said. Tyler looked out the barred window at the town moving past them, the gas stations and the fast food signs, and the ordinary Friday morning of a place that had no idea what was about to happen to its judicial infrastructure. "Then why are you still in chains?" he asked. Marcus looked at his hands, the red marks from the cuffs still visible on his wrists. "Because you need a witness," he said, "who cannot be ignored. Someone who sat where you sat and felt what you felt and has the power to make sure the people who built this place answer for it in a room where they cannot make the evidence disappear." Tyler was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "That's a real answer. It's the only one I have," Marcus said. The holding pen in the basement of the Harlow County Courthouse smelled of industrial cleaning fluid and the particular dense human warmth of a room holding too many people in too little space. And it was loud in the way that spaces are loud when everyone in them is frightened, but nobody is willing to show it. Conversations overlapping and bouncing off the concrete walls and producing a white noise of anxiety that pressed against the ears and made it difficult to think clearly. Diane Marsh moved through it with the efficiency of a woman who had been doing this for 19 years and had long since made peace with the fact that the system she worked within was profoundly imperfect and that her job was to be the best possible advocate for the human beings caught inside it every morning, without exception, regardless of how the previous day had gone. She was in her mid-40s, carried her case files in a tote bag that had been repaired at one strap with duct tape, and wore sensible shoes that she had chosen specifically because she spent most of her working life standing on concrete floors. And she called names and handed out folders and explained options with the careful, honest speed of someone who had 43 cases before lunch and genuinely cared about all of them. When she got to Marcus's file, she stopped, not dramatically, not with a gasp or a visible reaction, but with the particular quality of stillness that descends on a very experienced person who has just encountered something that does not fit the categories they use to organize the world. She looked at the address on the photocopied driver's license for a long moment. Then she looked at the man standing in front of her mud-caked suit wrists, bearing the marks of handcuffs applied to tight hair that needed attention. And behind all of that in the eyes, a quality of focused and patient attention that she had never seen in a holding pen before and could not quite name. She took out her phone, checked that the guard at the door was looking the other direction, and typed the name. The first result was a .gov page with an official photograph. A man in a dark suit at a formal ceremony shaking hands with the President of the United States. Both of them in the sharp light of a White House function room, and the eyes in that photograph were identical to the eyes looking at her across the holding pen table, except that the eyes in the photograph were not currently being held in a county jail on a manufactured DUI. Diane Marsh had the expression of a woman who has just understood something very large very quickly and is now calculating all of its implications at speed. "You need to listen to me carefully," Marcus said, his voice low and very direct, "because we don't have much time, and I need you to do one specific thing." "You're him," she said. "Yes." They arrested the Diane, he said, and the use of her name read from her ID badge noted and used precisely seemed to anchor her. "I don't need a plea agreement. I don't need a negotiation. What I need is to get to the podium in courtroom 7A before Judge Pratt makes a ruling, and I need you to keep the proceeding open long enough for me to speak on the record. That's all. Pratt will hold you in contempt before you finish your second sentence," she said. "He does it to defense counsel on a regular basis. He'll do it to you inside of 90 seconds. "Good," Marcus said. I need it on the record. I need Pratt's response on the record. I need the gallery to hear it. Everything that happens in that room in the next hour is evidence Diane and I need as much of it generated in open court as possible." Diane looked at him for a long moment, then looked at her tote bag, then looked back at him. "Okay," she said with the flat decisiveness of a woman who has made harder choices than this before breakfast. "Okay, I can do that." She straightened the strap of her tote bag, the duct-taped one, with a precise, settled motion, and walked toward the stairs that led up to courtroom 7A. Judge Gerald Pratt had been presiding over Harlow County's court for 19 years, and in those 19 years, he had developed a set of habits that had calcified from convenience into entitlement in the way that unchecked habits in powerful men tend to do. He scheduled his lunch reservation at the Palmetto Club before reviewing his morning docket. He kept a personal bottle of single malt in the bottom drawer of his chambers desk, and considered this a perk rather than a problem. And he treated the courtroom not as a space of civic obligation, but as a stage on which he was permanently and deservingly the most important figure. A conviction that 19 years of no meaningful accountability had done absolutely nothing to undermine. He was 66 years old, silver-haired broad in the way of a man who had once been athletic, and had long since converted that frame to a more sedentary purpose, and he wore his robes with the proprietary ease of someone who has forgotten that robes are a symbol of an institution rather than a personal decoration. The gallery for Monday morning arraignments in courtroom 7A was reliably full people who needed to be there, and people who came to watch the regular rhythm of a small court, in a county where public proceedings were still a form of civic entertainment. And Pratt entered with the gavel already in hand, and the room rose, and he sat, and the day began. District Attorney Wendell Cross presented the charges against Marcus with visible relish. He was the kind of prosecutor who enjoyed the performance of prosecution more than its substance, a man who had built a career on the goodwill of the judiciary rather than the quality of his legal work. And when he got to the impersonating a federal officer charge, he paused and looked at the gallery with the timing of a man who has used this beat before. The defendant, Cross said, claims to be the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He let that sit for a moment, and the gallery provided the expected ripple of amusement, and Pratt looked over his glasses at Marcus with an expression that had already arranged itself into dismissal before a word had been heard from the defense. The state is requesting bail be set at $500,000 cash, only given the defendant's demonstrated history of making extraordinary and false claims about his identity, and the flight risk this represents as an out-of-state individual. Pratt nodded with the satisfaction of a man who has already reached a conclusion and is simply waiting for the formalities to confirm it. He looked at Diane. "Miss Marsh, does the defense have anything before we proceed to bail, Your Honor?" Diane said, standing. "I move for immediate dismissal of all charges on the grounds of unlawful arrest and mistaken identity. And I would ask the court to hear directly from the defendant on the matter of his identity before any bail determination is made." Pratt's expression shifted by approximately 3 degrees in the direction of irritation. "On what grounds specifically does the defense claim the arrest was unlawful?" "On the grounds that the arresting officer lacked probable cause, manufactured the justification for the stop, applied excessive restraint during the arrest, and ignored clear and documented evidence of the defendant's identity during the booking process, including a federal credential and a classified fingerprint record that flagged at the NCIC database level." The gallery was quieter than it had been. Pratt looked at his docket sheet. He looked at Marcus. He looked at Diane with the specific expression of a man who has decided that the most effective response to an argument he finds inconvenient is to make clear through tone alone that the argument is not worth engaging. "Miss Marsh," he said, "I have 17 more cases this morning and a lunch reservation at noon. Dismissal denied. The defendant may address the court briefly and then we will set bail." Marcus was led to the podium chains, still on his wrists and ankles, and he stood at it with the straight-backed stillness he had maintained since the roadside, and he looked at Judge Pratt with the same quality of attention he would bring to any adversary, complete, unhurried, precise. "Judge Pratt," he said, his voice projecting cleanly to the back of the gallery without any apparent effort. "My name is Marcus Webb. I am the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I have been held in this county's detention facility for approximately 9 hours in violation of habeas corpus. My federal credentials were dismissed as fraudulent without investigation. My request to contact my office was denied 3 separate times, and the fingerprint record that would have resolved this situation was flagged at level 6 clearance and was characterized by your booking sergeant as a computer glitch." The gallery had gone very still. "I am informing this court," Marcus continued, "that a Level 3 federal recovery protocol was initiated from this facility at 11:43 last night, that agents from the Atlanta field office have been in contact with my office since that time, and that there is a very high probability that federal personnel are currently outside this building." Pratt's face had been moving through several colors during this speech, and it arrived at a deep mottled red as he reached for the gavel. "One more word out of you," Pratt said, his voice carrying the tight-clipped quality of genuine anger now rather than performed impatience, "and I will hold you in contempt of this court. You think you can come in here and threaten me with—" "I am not threatening you, Your Honor," Marcus said. "I am informing you. There is a meaningful difference, and I suspect you are going to have some time in the near future to reflect on it." The gavel came down like something had broken. "Contempt," Pratt said. 30 days consecutive. "Mr. Cross, I am setting bail at $500,000 cash bond, and I want this defendant removed from my—" The double doors at the back of courtroom 7A did not open. They absorbed an impact. The particular flat total impact of doors being hit by something that was not going to be stopped by doors, and the sound of it reached the front of the room, before the doors themselves finished moving, and the gallery rose as one chair's scraping voices starting and cutting off, and through the open doorway came 12 federal agents in tactical gear and bright yellow windbreakers, moving with the coordinated, deliberate precision of people who have trained for exactly this kind of room entry and are very calm about it. In the center of the formation walked Special Agent in Charge, Sandra Briggs. She was 5 feet 4 inches tall and moved like the room already belonged to her, not aggressively, not theatrically, but with the complete absence of hesitation that is the body language of absolute authority, exercising itself without apology. And she walked the center aisle of courtroom 7A without acknowledging the bailiff, without acknowledging Pratt, without acknowledging the DA, and she stopped at the defense table, and she looked at the handcuffs on Marcus Webb's wrists, and then she looked at the man standing next to him, which was Drayden, who had been seated in the front row and had stood when the doors came open, and whose face had been going through a very rapid and very visible sequence of realizations. "Get your hands," Briggs said, and the room was so quiet now that her voice carried to every corner of it without being raised at all off my director. Drayden's hand was not on Marcus. At that moment he had stood from the front row when the doors opened as anyone in the room had, but Briggs said it anyway, and the "my" in that sentence did something to the room that no legal argument had managed to do, which was make absolutely clear in 2 syllables the precise scale of what Drayden had done. Drayden's face went through 3 colors in approximately 4 seconds, the red of a man confronted, the white of a man understanding, and then a gray that was something else entirely, the gray of someone watching the specific future they have always been heading toward arrive without any of the warning they assumed they would have. He stepped back from where he had been standing and bumped into the prosecution table and stood there with his hands slightly away from his body in the particular lost posture of a large man who has just discovered that size is not the relevant variable. Briggs had the bailiff produce the handcuff keys in approximately the same tone of voice a person uses to ask for a pen, and she took the keys herself and removed Marcus's restraints with the careful, controlled precision of someone performing a task that required both technical accuracy and the management of a great deal of suppressed anger. And when the cuffs came free, she looked at the marks on Marcus's wrists, deep red, already darkening to the early stages of bruising, for one long moment, before setting the cuffs on the defense table with a deliberateness that the entire room registered. Marcus straightened his jacket. He turned to the gallery, to the court reporter, to the stunned rows of citizens who had come to watch Monday morning arraignments and had received something considerably more significant, and his voice when he spoke was the same voice he had used in that courtroom since the beginning level, carrying precise. "No one leaves this room," he said. "The court reporter's record from this proceeding is now federal property. Every officer of this court is a material witness and will be processed accordingly. Diane," he looked at the public defender, "thank you. You may step back. I'll be representing this matter personally from here." Diane Marsh sat down, set her duct-tape tote bag on the floor, and let out a long, careful breath. Judge Pratt had been trying to speak for approximately 30 seconds and had not yet produced anything coherent, which was a significant departure from his usual relationship with the courtroom's air supply. He had risen from the bench, which judges rarely do during proceedings, and was standing with the gavel still in his hand, and an expression that had moved well past indignation into something that more closely resembled the earliest stages of comprehension about what was actually happening. "This is a state court," he said, finally the words emerging with the effortful deliberateness of someone speaking through shock. "You have no jurisdiction here. You cannot simply—" When a local judicial officer uses his court as a mechanism to process and profit from the unlawful detention of citizens, Marcus said, turning to face the bench, "and when that court is connected to a revenue scheme that has been operating under the protection of that judicial officer for 6 years, jurisdiction does not remain a state matter. It becomes federal conspiracy, and I am exercising that jurisdiction now." He paused. "Sandra, secure the exits. Seize the court reporter's transcript and the recording system. I want Judge Pratt's calendar, his financial records, and his laptop imaged before we move him. There is a specific file his chamber's assistant will attempt to delete in the next 10 minutes if we don't prevent it, and I need that file." "Yes, sir," Briggs said, and she turned and gave 3 separate quiet instructions to 3 separate agents, and they moved. Wendell Cross, the district attorney, had been sitting at the prosecution table during this entire sequence and had not moved, and when 2 agents stepped toward him, with the quiet professional inevitability of people executing an order that has already been decided, he made a sound that was not quite a word, and his pen dropped to the floor and rolled under the table, and then he began to cry. Not quietly, not with dignity, but with the loud, gasping, ugly thoroughness of a man releasing a very large amount of very long-held fear all at once, and the sound of it echoed in the high ceiling of courtroom 7A, and the gallery watched it happen with the specific transfixed silence of people witnessing something they will describe for years. Marcus walked to where Drayden was still standing against the prosecution table, 2 agents on either side of him, and he crouched down to eye level. Drayden had somewhere in the past few minutes ended up on the floor, though no one could have said precisely when or how, and the room leaned forward trying to hear, and Marcus's voice was so quiet that most of them could not. "You used the word twice," Marcus said, "once on the roadside and once at the booking desk. Badge 317. I counted." He stood. He did not wait for a response. "Get him to the federal facility in Atlanta," he said to Briggs without looking at Drayden again. "Do not process him locally. I don't want his friends in a position to lose the paperwork." The sheriff's office smelled of old wood polish and the kind of tobacco that had been banned from public buildings for a decade, but whose ghost still lived in the furniture and the actual sheriff, a man named Terrence Good, who had been 40 miles away at a fishing lake when the federal operation began, and had been driven back in the rear seat of an FBI vehicle in waders and a fleece vest, was currently sitting in the hallway outside his own office, handcuffed to a chair, watching agents carry boxes out of his filing room, with the hollow expression of a man watching something he has spent years building come apart in a single morning. Marcus sat behind the sheriff's desk with a cup of tea. Briggs had produced it from somewhere with the efficiency she brought to everything, and reviewed the forensics report that the cyber unit had pulled from the server in the 22 minutes since they had gained access to it. "Walk me through it," he said. Briggs stood on the other side of the desk with a tablet, and she walked him through it with the focused directness he had always valued in her. No softening, no editorializing, just the facts in the order they mattered. Civil asset forfeiture scheme running for 6 years. Out-of-state plates targeted specifically with a preference for vehicles valued above $30,000. Drivers pulled over on manufactured probable cause claimed DUI claimed erratic. Driving claimed traffic violations that the dashcam footage consistently failed to capture because the dashcam footage was routinely managed and booked on charges the department knew would not survive a proper legal challenge, which did not matter because 92% of the people booked simply paid the fine and signed the plea and drove home in a rental car because they could not afford to stay in Harlow County fighting a charge in a court that had already decided the outcome. 340 victims documented over 6 years. A shell company registered in a neighboring county owned by the brother-in-law of Judge Gerald Pratt, through which the impounded vehicles were auctioned at below-market prices and the proceeds distributed through a layered payment structure that would have been difficult to untangle without the server access they now had. Evidence planted from Drayden's locker narcotics pre-bagged and batch-numbered the batch numbers matching planted evidence documented in 23 other cases. How many of those 23 cases resulted in convictions, Marcus asked. 19, Briggs said. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Danny Kowalski came in, then escorted by an agent, and he sat in the chair across from the desk with his badge and his service weapon already on the table, between them. He had placed them there voluntarily at the desk outside before being brought in, and he sat with his hands in his lap and looked at Marcus with the expression of a man who has been awake for 30 hours and has used most of that time making a decision he cannot reverse. "What time did you go to the bathroom?" Marcus asked. 11:43, Danny said. Marcus nodded. "You waited long enough to be certain," he said. "That matters." Danny told him everything, the structure of the quota which officers participated, and which looked away the arrangement with the impound lot. The two judges who attended the same quarterly auction dinner where the vehicles were previewed before public listing, the specific shift schedule that correlated with the targeting pattern, the name of the accountant who managed the shell company's books, and who had, according to Briggs's team, begun deleting files from a home computer in Savannah at 6:47 that morning and had been stopped at 6:51. When he was done, Marcus looked at him for a long moment. "You're going to face consequences," Marcus said. "A resigned badge, a cooperation agreement, probably probation. Not federal prison. That determination will be made by the DOJ, and they will take your cooperation fully into account, and I will make certain they have the complete picture of what you did and when you did it. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you there's no cost to having been present and silent for as long as you were." Danny nodded. He was looking at the badge on the table. "What I will tell you," Marcus said, "is that the choice you made at 11:43 in that bathroom required something that Drayden never once demonstrated in 6 years of doing this. You had doubt. You went and looked. And when you understood what you were looking at, you chose differently than he would have." He paused. "That is not nothing." The impound lot behind the Harlow County Sheriff's Department covered approximately an acre and a half of cracked asphalt and held on this particular morning 31 vehicles seized in the 14 months prior to the federal operation, and standing among them was the 1968 Dodge Charger, still carrying the dried Georgia mud from the night of the stop, dark and patient under the morning sun. Marcus walked the lot with Briggs, and she named the vehicles as they moved past them: a Porsche with Florida plates, a vintage pickup from Tennessee, a family van from Ohio with a bumper sticker from a national park in Colorado, and a children's booster seat still visible through the rear window, a late-model sedan with a car seat in the back, and a parking permit from a hospital in Tampa affixed to the windshield. Elena Castillo was standing near that sedan. She was in her early 30s, wearing scrubs that were not today's. She had been sleeping in a colleague's spare room for 3 weeks, working her new hospital job and taking the bus her entire life. Still in the trunk of a car she had been told was evidence she would never see again. And she was holding the keys that an agent had just returned to her, holding them in both hands like something fragile. and she was crying with the soundless internal thoroughness of someone who has been holding it together for a very long time and has just encountered the specific moment when they are allowed to stop. She flinched slightly when Marcus approached. There had been a great many men in official-looking clothing in the last few hours, and he stopped at a distance that was not threatening and waited for her to look at him. "Miss Castillo," he said, "my name is Marcus Webb. I'm with the FBI. That's your car, and it's being returned to you today, and every fee that's been accrued against it will be paid by the county, not by you. The men who took it have been arrested this morning." She looked at him. The keys were still in both hands. "Everything I own is in that trunk," she said. "I know," Marcus said. "We haven't touched it." She covered her face with both hands and stood like that for a long time, and Marcus stood and waited and did not fill the silence with anything, because sometimes the most useful thing a person with power can do is stand still and let someone else have the space they need to feel the full weight of a thing being resolved. When she looked up again, her eyes were red, but her expression had settled into something solid and clear. "Thank you," she said. "The people who did this answered for it this morning," Marcus said, "and they will answer for it in court, and the record will show exactly who they took it from and what it cost." He turned to Briggs. "Every vehicle in this lot gets traced today. Every owner gets contacted. Every dollar of lost wages, every rental car, every towing fee gets documented for the civil judgment. The county pays all of it." "Yes, sir," Briggs said. Marcus stood next to the charger for a moment, his hand on the roof, the dried mud rough under his palm, and he thought about the 3-week wait for the woman standing behind him and the 43 other people whose vehicles were in this lot, and the 300 who had gone home with plea deals and no car and no recourse. And he felt the weight of it, the way he had wanted to feel it, all of it clearly, without the comfortable insulation of institutional distance. He had needed to sit in that cell to feel this correctly. He had known that since the moment the door closed. The interrogation room at the Federal Mobile Command Unit parked outside the Harlow County Sheriff's Department smelled of new equipment and industrial carpet, and Drayden was already in it when Marcus entered Orange County, jumpsuit wrists zip-tied to the chair arm. The physical transition from officer to prisoner completed with a speed that seemed to have disordered something fundamental in him, because the man who had swaggered through a county bullpen at midnight had been replaced by something considerably less coherent. The muscle was still there, the physical fact of him, the broad shoulders and the thick neck, but it had become somehow beside the point, the way a large piece of furniture becomes beside the point in a room that is being emptied. And he was looking at the floor when Marcus came in and continued looking at it for a moment after Marcus sat down, as if eye contact had become a cost he could not currently afford. Marcus placed a tablet on the table between them. He did not open it immediately. "I'm going to tell you what we have," Marcus said, his voice at the same level it had maintained throughout, not cold exactly, but stripped of any warmth. The voice of a man delivering a precise and complete account of a situation. "And then you can tell me if there's anything you believe I've missed." He went through it methodically, every GPS log from Cruiser 317 cross-referenced with the impound records. The false overtime claims, 47 of them over 3 years. The text message thread between Drayden and the shell company accountant that the cyber unit had recovered in full from the server. The woman from 18 months ago who had filed a complaint against Drayden and withdrawn it 8 days later after a documented visit from Mullen to her home address. Drayden's jaw worked. He looked at the table. "I can give you people," he said finally. "Above me. The whole structure. I know where the money went, and I know whose signatures are on what. We have the signatures Marcus said. We have the server. We have Danny Kowalski's complete cooperation, which he provided voluntarily before we had the server, so the server confirmed rather than established. We have the accountant who made approximately 14 seconds of good decisions this morning before our team stopped the deletion. There is nothing you have that we do not already have, Colt." Drayden's hands tightened on the chair arms. "I have a family," he said. The words came out with the particular quality of words that have been held back for a while and are now being released as a last available tool, and Marcus recognized them as such and sat with them for a moment before responding because they deserved to be taken seriously, even from a man who had earned very little seriousness in return. "Tyler Reeves has a girlfriend who didn't know where he was for 9 hours," Marcus said, and his voice was not raised, not theatrical. It was quiet and very direct, and it landed with the full weight of a true thing stated plainly. "He has a mother who works nights, and when she called his phone and got no answer, she spent 4 hours thinking something had happened to him on the road, because that is what the mothers of young black men in counties like this one spend their lives being afraid of." Elena Castillo has parents in Miami who she was supposed to call when she arrived in Tampa. She didn't call for 3 weeks because she was too ashamed to tell them what happened, because that is what this kind of thing does to people. It makes them feel as if the shame belongs to them. He held Drayden's gaze. "You thought about their families when you put them in a position to have no car, no money, and a record. You thought about their families when you laughed on the roadside at midnight." Drayden looked away. His jaw was tight, his eyes wet, and he was pressing his lips together in the specific way of a man trying very hard not to make a sound. Marcus stood. "You're going to be indicted on 47 federal counts," he said, pulling his jacket straight. "RICO civil rights violations, evidence tampering, extortion, and deprivation of rights under color of law. The federal sentencing guidelines for that combination, given the 6-year duration and the number of documented victims, will be discussed with the DOJ, and I expect the conversation will arrive at a number north of 20 years. He walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame, his back still to the room. "Badge 317, he said. "I counted every minute of that cell. I'm going to make sure everyone else who sat in it gets counted too." He walked out. He did not look back. The dashcam file from Cruiser 317 was declassified, cleaned of bystander faces by the Bureau's digital forensics team, and uploaded to the FBI's public transparency portal 48 hours after the operation in Harlow County on a direct order from the director's office, and from there, the internet did what the internet does when it encounters something true and enraging and impossible to look away from. The video was grainy, bleached by the headlight glare and the rain, and the visual was difficult to parse in places, but the audio was crystalline. Every word, every instruction, every deliberate cruelty. And the moment the clip reached the point where Drayden used the word that he used and then used it again, 12 minutes later at the booking desk, and then laughed. The world encountered that laugh and understood something about it that made the sharing velocity of the clip something that network analysts later described as unlike anything they had seen for a non-disaster event. The headline was not about the FBI. It was "The Officer Who Laughed." Letters arrived at the J. Edgar Hoover Building in Washington. Within 36 hours, not from legislators, not from law enforcement organizations managing their institutional exposure, but from people, the kind of people who sit in the gallery at Monday morning arraignments and know exactly what they are watching. A grandmother in Mississippi who had lost her son's car to a scheme she now understood had a name. A retired teacher in Ohio who had paid a plea agreement for a stop she had always known was wrong, because the alternative was missing a week of work. She could not afford to miss a man in Louisiana who wrote 3 sentences and then a 4th sentence that simply said, "I spent 11 days in a cell for nothing," and nobody ever counted. Marcus read every letter. He read them at his desk in Washington at 6 in the morning before his briefings began, and he read them the way he had always read intelligence, completely carefully, with full attention to what they were actually saying rather than what they appeared on the surface to say. And what they were actually saying collectively was that what had happened to him was not exceptional, that the machine that had processed him had processed thousands of people before him, and that the only difference between his situation and theirs was the GPS tracker in his shoe, and the agent in Atlanta who kept her phone on at night. He kept the letters in a folder in his desk drawer, and he took the folder with him when he went to testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he set it on the table in front of him when he sat down. The consequences came in stages, which is how consequences in federal cases always come, and they were thorough in the way that federal processes are thorough when properly directed. Colt Drayden was indicted on 47 federal counts and sentenced 8 months after the operation to 22 years at USP Coleman II in Florida, a high-security federal facility where the institutional hierarchy is very clear about how it regards former law enforcement officers, and where Drayden arrived as inmate number 9047231 and began serving a sentence that would keep him there until he was 61 years old. Pete Garza, who had stood at the rear bumper and said nothing and done nothing and laughed when Drayden laughed, received 14 years. He had cooperated with investigators, provided a detailed account of the quota arrangement, and then discovered that by the time he offered to cooperate, Danny had already given investigators everything he had more carefully and more completely, and his cooperation was therefore confirmatory rather than foundational, which the DOJ took into account in a way that was precise and not particularly merciful. Roy Mullen, the booking sergeant with the gas station burrito, pleaded guilty to conspiracy and evidence tampering and received 8 years and a pension forfeiture that converted the retirement he had spent 26 years accumulating into a number he was advised not to think about too carefully. Judge Gerald Pratt was disbarred. His assets were frozen, and the lake house he had purchased with funds traceable to the shell company's auction proceeds was seized under civil forfeiture. The very legal mechanism he had helped operate for 6 years was used to take the primary thing he had bought with it, and the property was subsequently converted by court order into a housing assistance fund for wrongful conviction victims in Harlow County, which was a detail that the DOJ press office noted with the measured understatement of people who recognize a certain kind of justice but know better than to gloat. Wendell Cross. The DA was disbarred and received 6 years and cried through his entire sentencing hearing with the same quality of crying he had brought to the courtroom on the morning of the operation, which the transcript recorded neutrally and completely. Danny Kowalski resigned from the Harlow County Sheriff's Department, entered a cooperation agreement, and received a probationary sentence with no incarceration. He moved to Charlotte with his wife, got a job in private security, coaches youth football on Saturday mornings, and pays his mortgage. And Marcus Webb wrote to the DOJ a letter that described the specific moment and the specific choice and the specific cost of making it, which the judge read into the sentencing record in full. Tyler Reeves had all charges against him dropped within 72 hours of the operation, received a wrongful arrest settlement, and enrolled in community college in the fall studying criminal justice, and Marcus sent him one letter with no return address that Tyler keeps in the drawer of his nightstand, which his girlfriend has read and which his mother has read, and neither of them talks about very often because it means something they do not entirely have words for yet. The Harlow County Sheriff's Department was dissolved by state order. Every civil asset forfeiture proceeding in the state became subject to mandatory federal oversight review and a new state law. It bore no one's name, which was how Marcus had asked for it to be required. Body camera footage to be streamed live to tamper-proof servers administered by a party independent of the recording department, with a 90-day minimum retention period and access available to any defendant in any proceeding in which that footage was potentially relevant. 340 people received letters informing them of a civil action on their behalf. Most of them, when the letter arrived, read it more than once. 3 months later, onto Thursday evening in late spring, when Washington had finally decided to be warm rather than merely threatening warmth, Marcus drove the 1968 Dodge Charger down to the Potomac and parked it on the Riverside Path, where the light at that hour came in low and gold off the water and made everything look like the good version of itself. The car was clean. The mud was long gone. The paint restored to the deep particular black that his father had always called anthracite. Not quite black, not quite anything else, the color of something that has absorbed everything. It has been through and converted it into density rather than damage. And it smelled of leather, and something older, something that lived in the seats and the door panels and the grain of the steering wheel, the accumulated presence of a man who had driven this car for 45 years and left something of himself in every surface he had touched. Marcus was leaning against the hood when Elena Castillo pulled up in her Honda, still in scrubs from a 12-hour shift at Tampa General, driving through D.C. on her way north to see her parents for the first time since the move. And she parked and got out and stood for a moment looking at the Charger with the expression of someone encountering a thing they associate with a very specific and complicated memory. She walked over and ran her hand along the front fender, the way people touch things they thought they had lost forever, slowly, without performance. They stood by the water for a while, and the conversation that followed had the unhurried quality of two people who had survived the same storm from different positions and were now for the first time on the same side of it. Elena told him that the worst part had not been the 3 weeks on her colleague's couch, though that had been genuinely bad. It had been the moment in the impound lot when she first tried to tell Drayden's partner that there was a mistake, that the car was hers, that everything she owned was in it, and watched the information arrive in that man's face, and watched it not register as anything that required a change of action, watched herself become in real time a person whose words did not have weight in the room she was standing in. "That's what they take," she said, "not the car. They take the part of you that believes you're allowed to exist in a space and be heard." Marcus looked at the river. He thought about his father pulling over on a Tuesday in Detroit, both hands on the wheel, and 11-year-old Marcus in the passenger seat watching him, and understanding without being told exactly what his father was doing and why and what it cost the careful, practiced dignity of a man managing his own existence in a system that had decided his existence was negotiable. "My father used to say that a man has a right to take up space on the road he pays taxes on," Marcus said. "He said it every time he took this car out. I think he was saying it to himself as much as he was saying it to me." He was quiet for a moment. "I didn't make the call from the roadside," he said. "I had the phone. I could have ended it in 90 seconds, been back in D.C. by morning. But I sat in that cell for 9 hours because I needed to know what it actually felt like without the GPS tracker and the Atlanta field office. I needed to feel it the way Tyler felt it, the way you felt it. Because if I was going to use what happened to build something that protected people who could not protect themselves, I needed to understand the weight of it correctly from the inside." Elena looked at him. "Did it work?" she asked. Marcus thought about the 340 letters. He thought about the boy in the corner of cell 4 who had asked him why he was still there, and then listened to the answer with the careful attention of someone storing it for future use. He thought about Danny Kowalski on a bathroom floor at 11:43, looking at a photograph and making a decision. "Ask Tyler," he said. She laughed a real laugh, short and surprised and warm, and then she hugged him. And it was not a formal embrace or a professional gesture, but the kind of hug that acknowledges shared weight and shared survival, and the particular relief of being on the other side of a thing, and Marcus held still and let it mean what it meant. He watched her get back into her Honda and pull out onto the river road, her tail lights moving south until the city swallowed them, and then he stood alone for a while with the Charger and the water and the last of the light. He opened the door and sat in the driver's seat. In the quiet of the car, in the smell of leather and his father's years, he could almost hear the old man's voice, the way he had always heard it before, a long drive, not commanding, not instructing, just reminding, with the patient certainty of someone who has thought it through and arrived at a conclusion worth keeping. "Keep both hands on the wheel, son. People will always be watching. Make sure they see you doing it right." Marcus put his hands on the wheel, both of them at 10 and 2. He turned the key. The engine answered deep and deliberate and unhurried the particular sound of something that has been kept and cared for and has not forgotten what it is, and it settled into a rhythm that Marcus felt in his sternum and his hands and the soles of his feet, the voice of his father's car telling him what it always told him, which was that the road was open and the night was clear, and that a man who has done what he came to do can drive home without looking in the mirror. He put the car in gear. He pulled out onto the river road with no escort, no convoy, no federal vehicles trailing at a respectful distance, just the charger and the open road, and the city spreading out ahead of him a little bit cleaner than it had been a season ago, the darkness a little less complete in the specific corner of Georgia where a courthouse had been emptied of its corruption and 340 people had received a letter telling them they had been counted. Marcus Webb drove north into the Washington night, both hands on the wheel, and the road held him without condition, the way a road holds anyone who has earned the right to be on it. Officer Colt Drayden made every decision he made because he believed with the complete confidence of a man who has never been corrected by anyone who mattered to him that the badge on his chest was a license rather than a responsibility, that it permitted rather than obligated, that it elevated rather than charged. What he could not see from inside that belief was that the moment you use authority to take from people rather than protect them, you have already begun the process of your own undoing, because authority borrowed from an institution for private purposes is borrowed with interest, and the interest rate is everything. The people who matter most in the story of what happened in Harlow County, Georgia, are not the ones with titles in the resolution. They are Tyler Reeves, sitting in a classroom right now, learning the law that once failed him, reading cases with the particular attention of someone who has felt the machinery from the inside. They are Elena Castillo, driving to Tampa on a road that belongs to her, everything she owns in the trunk of a car she was once told she would never see again. They are the 340 people who signed plea deals they didn't owe and went home and never told anyone, and who opened a letter one morning and understood perhaps for the first time that someone had been in that room and had not looked away and had not stopped counting. If this story reached something in you, if you recognized in it a truth about power and about what happens when power goes unchecked and unaccounted, and about what it means when someone with the ability to look away decides not to then hit that like button and share it, because these stories travel further when they travel together, and there are a great many people who need to hear them. Subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you never miss one. And tell us in the comments, if you had been Marcus Webb on that roadside, would you have made the call immediately? Or would you have waited for the courtroom type called if you would have ended it at the curb? Type waited. If you would have stayed in that cell long enough to make sure it counted. We read every single one.